Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Hello, book lovers. A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, episode number 75. We are 3/4 of the way to 100 a century. Now, our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, also known as V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, reader, one of your co-founders and hosts, coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country today.
And I am Darren Kazenko, dystopian science fiction and horror author, reader, of course, and one of your hosts and co-founder of Australian Book Lovers, coming to you today from Kaurna country in the lovely mid-coast of South Australia.
Now, episode 75 is going to be a bit of quite a different episode for our author. Is very interesting. She's got a very interesting story that she's written. I'm going to leave that to you for later. But let's start with our usuals. And I'm going to start with bingo.
Okay. I'm looking down at my card now.
Just bingo, because 75 is strive and strive. And I think that's kind of quite a nice reflection of what we've been doing, which, you know, despite having zero resources apart from our time and energy, we have been able to put together 75 episodes and talk to some amazing people and really done the celebrating and supporting of Australian writers and book lovers that we said we would. So 75, Darren, good on us.
Yes, absolutely. Strive, I like that. And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of irony there, because last night a dear friend who has projection sessions in his sort of mad cave, I suppose you could say, with the old 16mm and 8mm. We're all movie buffs.
Yeah.
But prior to a movie we screened last night, he put on a Muhammad Ali boxing reel, which happened to be from 1975.
Woo-hoo!
And I can't remember the name of the other fighter, but he was definitely striving to stay on his feet. 15 rounds. It was quite interesting. But yes, number 75, which apparently also means, with regards to the meaning of the number 75, means that one is about to go through some major changes in life, and that these will significantly change up the perspective on the world. So, woohoo, who knows? That's a bit of a mystery and anticipation now to the number 75.
Yes.
So who knows what happens from this episode, which, as you mentioned, we have the lovely, I get the pleasure, should I say, of interviewing the lovely Conchita GarSantiago. So she's been so kind to talk about her latest book, A Cry for Home, which we're going to get to. Some pretty intense themes there, and a lot to unravel. But before that, how would you like to know a little bit about the year 1975, besides the boxing that went on in Australia?
Well, yeah, I was a teenager in that time, and it was, interesting. So hit me with some of the main things.
Well, there was apparently the Tasman Bridge disaster. Now, the Tasman Bridge in Hobart was struck by an ore carrier, and apparently the bridge partially collapsed onto the vessel, which obviously sank it. Unfortunately, there were 7 crew and I believe 5 motorists that were killed. So a bit of a odd disaster there. On the 5th of April, the Australian Embassy in South Vietnam was closed, and all the staff were evacuated, because, of course, that was just prior to the fall of Saigon. So quite international event there. Now, on the 1st of July, Medibank was introduced to Australia. And this one I found pretty cool. Australia Post and Telecom were formed from the Postmaster General's Department. So there we have it. 1975 was the beginning of lost parcels and dodgy telephone connections. No, they do.
Well, my dad
actually
used
do a
to
great
work
job.
for the PNG, and then he became working for Telecom. So, as it was, because he worked on the phones. But yes, interesting times, privatisation.
Well, speaking of PMG, let's change the letter in there and go to PNG. So Papua New Guinea actually gained its independence from Australia in 1975.
There you go.
Yeah. Now, 2 staff members of the Queensland Premier's Department were injured when they opened a letter bomb addressed to the Premier Joe Bjelke-Petersen. So a bit of a, I think obviously we've had something similar here in Adelaide, in Weymouth Street, that's the one. Now, Xavier, I hope I pronounced that right, Xavier Herbert's novel Poor Fellow, My Country won the Miles Franken Award in 1975. And to just bring a little bit of lighthearted finish, Graham Kennedy said the crow call, which I won't do, but it starts with F, ends with K, and has a long R in the middle. Now during a live ad on the Graham Kennedy show. So now that actually prompted studio operators, got the sort of big tap on the shoulder, and the show was immediately pulled, and went to a black screen saying that the network had technical difficulties. While in Sydney, the show went to a commercial break, and Kennedy never came back, with Bert Newton remaining during the airtime. So it says here the same happened in Adelaide, with the exception that it was succeeded by Don Lane, starting the host to his own variety show with Bert Newton. So that was pretty funny, because I think something similar happened later with Don Lane. Anyway, he hosted Australia's Dirtiest Home Videos. I think it was Don Lane, and that ended up getting pulled halfway through too. So a little bit of television history there. And as far as inventions, this one's super cool. Right here in Australia, 1975, Zip Industries designed and patented instant boiling water heater. There we go. That's a big thing for the world.
Amazing.
And that's that's episode 75. That means that is a little bit of Australia in 1975.
Yes, and so how about a little bit more Australia with the meanings and idioms, or some of the particular Australian words from the delightful Australian National University School of Literature, Languages and Linguistics. Thank you very much to the ANU College of Arts and Social Sciences. We are looking at C, and I thought, it was kind of a lovely segue, because the first word I've got is cark, with a C-A-R-K.
Oh, okay.
To
cark it.
Yeah. So for Australians that don't know, or for any of our international listeners, cark means to die, to break down, or to fail. It can also be spelt cark with a K, K-A-R-K. And really, it often takes the form of cark it. The word's probably a figurative use of an earlier sense of cark, meaning the caw of a crow, which is imitative, and it was first recorded in the 1970s. So there you go. Interesting. I thought it might be a bit older than that, but yeah, okay. One of my favourites, of course, which you will no doubt know, is, of course, the word chook.
Of course. Who doesn't know the word chook? Although I'm thinking about it, so there may be more than one meaning.
No.
No?
Not necessarily. Well, it is, of course, a domestic fowl, a chicken, and it comes from the British dialect chuck, which is chicken and fowl, which is a variant of chick, and chook is a very common term for the living bird, although chook raffles held in Australian clubs and pubs have ready-to-cook chooks as prizes. And the term has been transferred to refer to other birds, and often in the form old chook, it can refer to a woman. And you can see a chook run or chooklet, all those kind of things. First recorded as Chucky in 1855. There you go.
I've won a couple of chook raffles in the day.
Yeah, have you? That's good. Another interpretation, I guess, of chook is the saying, may your chooks turn into emus and kick your dunny down. So, of course, we know what a dunny is from last time, but it is, in fact, a jocular curse. The expression recalls an earlier time when many Australians kept chooks, domestic chickens, in the backyard, and the dunny was a separate outhouse. So there you go, and there's a couple of less pleasant C words that I thought I would skip on over and talk about a cobber, who is in fact a friend or a companion, and it's also used as a form of address. G'day cobber. The word probably derives from the Yiddish word chaba, comrade. A Yiddish source may seem unlikely, but there are several terms in Australian English that are likely to be derived from Yiddish, including duva, which is thingamajig, shaza, unproductive or worthless mining claim or mine, shikad, which is drunk, and it's likely that these terms, as well as copper, found their way into London slang, especially from the Jewish population living in the East End, and from there via British migrants into Australian English. There you go. Sometimes it's suggested that cobber derives from the British dialect, who lists the word cob meaning to take a liking to anyone or to cotton to. But the evidence is from only one Suffolk source, and the dictionary adds, not known to our other correspondents. So there you go. That is the origin of cobber.
Well, I don't know if it was purely a South Australian thing or whether other listeners out there might have a similar memory, but when you could go to the corner deli or milk bar in Victoria and get your mix, you could buy the lollies by the, you want 5 of them, 2 of them, 3 of them. Wasn't there a cobber?
Yes,
and they were the hard
bag.
Toffee with the chocolate, and they would,
with the chocolate on.
That's
yes,
the one.
Indeed.
They were good. Yeah, in fact, they were my favourite.
They were
cobbers.
good.
They lasted longer than a choc frog or anything like that.
Yeah, they did, because they get stuck in your teeth, and then you had to suck them out for hours. Yeah. So there you go, coppers. There are a few little Australian words.
Oh, nice. Well, there we go. A little bit of celebration of Australia. Well, language and the year that was 1975, and here we are, episode 75. Do you think maybe we should jump into some news?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go. Du-du-du-du-du-du. Okay, so maybe it's my turn to kick off the news a little bit this episode, number 75. Now, of course, at the episode 74, I did enjoy talking about some of the fabulous international writing guests that will be coming down to Adelaide and perhaps other cities while they're here in Australia, but predominantly for the Adelaide Fringe. And now the official, I guess, timetable isn't out till February, so still a couple of days away at the time of recording. But as promised, I wanted to just highlight a couple of Australian authors that will be featured in Writers' Week. And when the timetable comes out on the next episode, we'll dive down a little bit further. So I'll just go through some. This is just a small number. We'll go through more on the next episode. But keep your ears peeled. If there's an author that you that makes you go, ooh, then definitely stay tuned, and we'll let you know where they're all going to be. So the first author from Australia is Nicole Abadie. Now, Nicole Abadie writes about books for Good Weekend. She appears regularly at writers' festivals and other literary events and has a books podcast called Books, Books, Books. So she'll be appearing. Again, I will wait for the timetable for all the details. Now, we have Randa Abdel Fattah. Now, Randa Abdel Fattah is a Palestinian Egyptian Muslim multi-award winning author of 14 books published in over 20 countries. Her most recent books include Coming of Age in the War on Terror, which was actually longlisted for the 2022 Stella Prize and shortlisted for the 2022 New South Wales and Victorian Premier's Literary Awards. The Very Best Donut, and her first picture storybook, 11 Words for Love, which is illustrated by Maxine Beneba Clark. So that is author Randa Abdel Fattah. We also have Dean Ashenden. Now, Dean Ashenden, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly, has worked as an academic, a political advisor, and journalist. His book, Telling Tennant's Story, won the 2022 inaugural Political Book of the Year. We also have Michael Bradley from Australia. So Michael Bradley is a lawyer, writer, managing partner of Marquee Lawyers, which is a commercial firm with a strong human rights interest, and he is a regular columnist for Crikey. His first book, Coniston, detailed the last massacre of Aboriginal people, and his second, System Failure, explores how our current justice system fails survivors of sexual assault. His latest book, Freeing My Family, is co-authored with Saddam Abdulsalam. So that is Michael Bradley. So that could be definitely interesting topics of discussion, obviously pretty serious, but nonetheless maybe worth our time. As all of these authors are, of course. Now, sticking with our Australian fantastic authors, we have Bernadette Brennan. Now, Bernadette is the award-winning biographer of Brian Castro and Helen Garner. Her most recent book, Leaping into Waterfalls, the enigmatic Gillian Mears, was shortlisted for the New South Wales Premier's Douglas Stewart Award and won the prestigious McGarry Medal for Biography, the National Biography Award, and the Age Book of the Year Non-Fiction Award. Bernadette is also one of 5 judges for the Miles Franklin Award. So that'd be a good insight to find out how Bernadette goes about judging and what sort of things they look for in a work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, last but not least, because I'm going to be spotlighting a whole lot more Australian authors, but we have Shannon Burns. So I had to finish in Adelaide. Shannon Burns is a writer, critic and academic from Adelaide. His memoir, Childhood, has just been published. So that is just a few Aussie authors that will be part of the massive Writers' Week and obviously of the Fringe Festival itself. And by the time we get to episode 76, I do believe the timetable will be up, and we'll start drilling right down into where you can catch all these fantastic authors and start marking your calendar for some wonderful events.
Absolutely. And I've got one more little event to share as part of the news. So this is a wholly Victorian festival, but anyway.
Oh, fancy that.
QLit, this Queer Victorian Festival of Words, is new and aims to celebrate the work of all LGBTQIA plus storytellers, writers of fiction and non-fiction, graphic novelists, singer-songwriters, playwrights, screenwriters, mixed media creatives, children's authors, academics and poets. So the free festival launches in Ballarat, Shepparton and Traralgon in January, so they're country Victoria for those that are not aware, and in January, Collingwood, that happened in January, so those kind of things have begun already. And in February, we've got Collingwood, Geelong and Warrnambool in April. So there you go. It's Collingwood in February, Geelong and Warrnambool in April. So there you go.
Wow, so the events are definitely heating up, that's for sure.
Yeah, there is a lot more going on now. I think people are getting a little bit more surety of, hosting their events or putting the events out there and, coping with still the pandemic is not gone, but coping with, the new restrictions and having people attend safely. So that's good. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, there's a little bit of news for episode 75. We'll
Indeed.
Keeping a bit short this episode because we've got, as we've mentioned, we've got a fantastic interview coming up. Not only that, we have a beautiful reading from author Conchita GarSantiago at the end of this one. So we've done the serious stuff. We've talked about the year that was 1975, the bingo call, and we've covered a bit of news. Now, and of course covered some great words, except for, you did leave one C, one out, which I think you should have, but has become probably more Australian than any word. However, how about we just relax before we get into the interview with a quick cuppa in the Readers Cafe and talk about books, which is what we're all about.
Excellent. Bring it
on.
on.
All right, see you in there.
So here we are in the Readers Cafe, and I think that we've had a couple of hot days, so I might go with something cool to drink, and mention that my niece has introduced me to a rather nice drink, which is rather pleasant in the evening, which is a Shiraz gin. So I'm not sure whether you've ever had one of those, Darren, but in the Readers Cafe, that's kind of perfect. It's this Shiraz gin, which is the Shiraz grapes, soaked in gin for however many years it is, and then of course a little bit of ice, some lemon, and top it up with tonic water. It's pretty damn good.
You have sold it well, I'll give you that. Even though I'm not a fan of gin, you have me questioning my taste buds now.
Oh, there you go. All right. So I thought I would share where I am on my Readers Challenge this week, because as I mentioned the last time, I'm taking the 2023 Goodreads challenge, and I had 125 books as my challenge. So I'm actually 5 books ahead of schedule, which is good because when I come back to work full time as I have, there is less time. But what I have been reading, let me just click over to where I have been reading. Since we spoke, I've finished listening to The Autumn Castle by Kim Wilkins. I finished all the short stories in Growing Up in Country Australia, which was edited by Rick Morton, but of course had many, really was a lovely anthology of Australian authors. I've read some quick and dirties, but they're sometimes, because I've had my husband doing a few medical things and you have to kind of wait for lots of stuff, so it's good to have stories that you don't need to concentrate too hard on, and it doesn't matter if you forget where you're up to, you can just read them again. So I've read a few supernatural stories and a little bit of Legacy of the Lost, secrets and magic and those kind of things. That was interesting. I listened to Catching Talakrow by Amberlynn Quayamolina, and also by her brother was in there as well, and that was really interesting. It's an older story. I think it was published in 2018, but that was amazing, about a young girl who died, but she still hung around as a ghost for her dad, and that was nice. Good Australian author there. Murder by the Cup, another short cozy witchy mystery, which I must say that we've got some of those on our website. Paula Mason
yes, we do.
Has some of those. Is very good. I've read a number of hers. Lost Souls, Mending Magic by W.J. May, a dystopian paranormal teen romance. Again, it's like, just quick flick through these. And then By Earth, The Witches of Portland. And then I finished this last book, Speed of Dark by Elizabeth Moon. So Elizabeth is an American writer who's written a lot of sci-fi. And this was just a bit of a different one. It did win some, not the Dead Buzz, that's Australian. It did win a couple of sci-fi awards in the US. But yeah, it probably didn't. I didn't enjoy it as much as I have earlier ones of hers. It was about, she was writing as in first person as a young man with autism, and whilst she has a son with autism and had lots of conversations with friends who do have autism, it just didn't quite finish, because they kind of were treating autism as an illness to be cured, and it's just kind of the near future. And so it was less sci-fi and more social discussion. Anyway, so I finished that one. So that's the ones that I've finished. I'm not telling you what I'm reading at the moment.
Yeah, far out.
That's what I've read since the last.
Well, I'm glad there's a couple of spooky ookies in there.
Oh yeah, most and those are my comfort reads. Just go back and go, oh yeah, what's happening here? Young teens finding their magic. The kind of classic
Yeah.
ones. So there you go.
Well, speaking of good books,
Yes.
we've had a whole heap of books added
Have
to the.
we ever?
Yes, to the Australian Book Lovers website. So I thought, of course, it being here in the Readers Cafe, where although I'm tempted by your gin, I'm going to stick to a strong coffee. However, I'm going to because I've got to be able to still have my legs in the Writers' Lounge. But I am rediscovering. See, I didn't drink milk for a long time, but I'm decided to go to banana and peanut butter smoothies in the morning. So I've rediscovered milk for a little bit. So I might have a iced chocolate milkshake today.
Right.
Although it's probably oh damn, it's probably a little bit chilly for that. But anyway, no, we've got some fantastic titles which I'd love to share with all of our amazing listeners. So the first couple are thrillers. So if thrillers or mysteries and thrillers are your jam, I think it's these are titles you're definitely going to want to check out. The first one is called The Torrent by Dinuka McKenzie, and of course this is, you can find it under our mystery and thriller genre. So The Torrent reads as follows: a loving husband lost to devastating summer floods, a teenage girl injured during a robbery, two seemingly unconnected cases that will push a detective to the brink. In northern New South Wales, heavily pregnant and a week away from maternity leave, Detective Sergeant Kate Miles is exhausted and counting down the days. But a violent hold-up at a local fast food restaurant with unsettling connections to her own past means that her final days will be anything but straightforward. When a second case is dumped on her lap, the closed case of a man drowned in recent summer floods, what begins as a simple informal review quickly grows into something more complicated. Kate can either write the report that's expected of her or investigate the case the way she wants to. How far is Kate prepared to push to discover the truth? Yeah, definitely a little bit of tension growing there already.
Absolutely. I love that. I have read the Torrent.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it was very well done. It was clever. It was... you know that I like a little bit of the relationships and the social side in all of my books, and this was the perfect combination. It was fantastic. Really loved it.
Well, I wonder then, because another title that's on there is the part 2, which is called Taken by
I know, I can't
Dinuka
wait to read
McKenzie.
it.
Yes. So once again, this is under our mystery and thrillers. So Taken, this reads as follows. The tense, must-read new Detective Kate Miles novel from the award-winning author of The Torrent. Detective Sergeant Kate Miles is back from maternity leave and struggling on multiple fronts. The pressures of a second child, financial strain from her husband losing his job, and a corruption scandal that may involve her father. When an infant goes missing, Kate finds herself fronting a high-profile and emotionally fraught case. Was baby Sienna removed from her bassinet by an unknown abductor, or is the answer much closer to home? Amidst a frenzied media demanding answers and a station chief looking for any reason to remove her from the investigation, Kate is pushed to her limits, pulled between the competing demands of the family at the centre of the case and her own spiralling personal life. and that is Taken. So I guess the second Kate Miles thriller by author Dinuka McKenzie. So, if either of those descriptions have perked your interest, jump on the Australian Book Lovers website, have a look at the books under our mystery and thriller, and click the button, and you can go to the link that the author has nominated where you can purchase the book. Simple as that, and they sound like some two cracker reads, absolutely. But we've got another thriller. This time we've got a book called Dark Mode, and this is by author Ashley Kalagian Blunt. And again, this is found under our mystery and thrillers. So Dark Mode reads as follows. Is it paranoia, or is someone watching? For years, Reagan Carson kept her life offline. No socials, no internet presence, no photos, safe. Until the day she stumbles on a shocking murder in a Sydney laneway. The victim looks just like her. Coincidence? As more murders shake the city and she's increasingly drawn out from hiding, Reagan is forced to confront her greatest fear. She's been found. A riveting psychological thriller drawn from true events, Dark Mode delves into the terrifying reality of the dark web and the price we pay for surrendering our privacy one click at a time. Ooh, there we go. Dark Mode,
really
Dark Net.
Well.
There we go. And do you know, apparently, I can't remember the exact percentage, but apparently, like the internet web that the World Wide Web that we all browse is like 5% of what's actually out there. The rest is all the dark web and underground stuff. There you go.
Yeah,
so
well,
we're just splashing in the kiddies pool.
We are. And look, we're going to be speaking with both Dinuka and Ashley in upcoming episodes. And as part of her research, Ashley did a lot of delving around the dark web, which interestingly, I think was started by the FBI in the US as a way to kind of put secrets that you don't want secrets told us, that you put them amongst a whole lot of other stuff. But we'll see. I'm sure that Ashley will be able to give us an
that's
idea.
going to be a good interview, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to have to drill down on that.
Yeah, that will be absolutely fascinating. So, yes. And, of course, Dinuka McKenzie, as I mentioned, I love the Torrent. Really looking forward to hearing about Kate Miles. And that perfect, for me, it was a really good balance of the personal and the professional. There was enough of both to keep you turning the pages to see what's happening.
Nice.
So, yeah, so looking forward to it. Good thrillers, Australian writers. And
definitely.
We had Petronella McGovern on not so long ago, and had her fabulous story. So Chris, who wrote The Tilt, Chris Hammer.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a great crime fiction out there in Australia. So
Absolutely.
Good. Have you got any more for us?
I do indeed. We're going to switch gears a little bit. I was just picturing though what I would do if I went down an alley, found a dead body and looked just like me. But it would depend on what I've been up to too.
Yeah,
No, we're switching gears down to historical fiction. Now, this is by author Ben Hobson, who I have the absolute, or should I say treasured honour of being able to talk to very shortly. So it's going to be really good. But Ben Hobson is the author of the latest release, The Death of John Lacey. So, Death of John Lacey reads as follows. An Australian western set in the goldfields of Ballarat, The Death of John Lacey is a viscerally powerful story of greed, power and violence from the author of Snake Island. John Lacey's lust for power and gold brings him riches and influence beyond his wildest dreams. Only he knows the terrible crime he committed to attain that wealth. Years later, as Lacey ruthlessly presides over the town he has built and named after himself, no one has the courage to question his power or how he wields it. Ooh, The Death of John Lacey. I'm getting, now, I haven't spoken with Ben yet, and I haven't read the book, but the first thing I'm thinking of, please forgive me listeners, is the old 80s movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. Because remember, the bad guy kind of owns the town. But so it's going to be good fun having a chat. But that is The Death of John Lacey under our historical fiction. Shifting gears once again, this one's really interesting. This is actually by author Kerr. Now, Kay's put a couple of books up, so I'll be covering a couple of those in the next Reader's Cafe. But I wanted to start with one of her books called Love and Autism. Now, this one you'll find under our non-fiction genre. So Love and Autism is described as follows. Michael made a name for himself on the hit show Love on the Spectrum. After his televised first dating experiences, will he complete his quest to find his queen? Chloe was always good at math, with feelings too big to be contained. When she reconnects with her childhood boyfriend, it must be fate. Noor has had a lot on her plate from a young age, especially at home. People-pleasing becomes her survival mode, but Noor can't keep her struggles inside forever. Jess has spent a lifetime being put into different boxes. Through her strong will and creativity, can she break out and build a life that is truly her own? Tim is a non-speaking autistic man who has been underestimated all his life. But through willpower, technology and a mother's love, he has a chance of finding a different kind of voice. Through the intimate writing of critically acclaimed autistic author Kerr, Love and Autism presents an uplifting celebration of neurodivergent love, the search for it, and a deeper look into the lives of autistic Australians. And that is Love and Autism by Kerr.
Which is a very interesting book, really, to be written. And yeah, as I mentioned, I've just been reading The Speed of Dark. But this Kay we'll also be chatting to in the near future. So yeah, keep your ear out for when her episode comes up. I can't remember if she's after Ben or a little bit later, but yeah, there we go. So it'll be lovely to chat with Kay.
Fantastic author today. We've got fantastic authors coming. It's we're pretty lucky doing the show. Absolutely,
we are very lucky. Yes. Authors always are happy to talk about their books, is what I've found. Even if the authors are a little shy, if you bring them on and ask them about their stories, they open up really easily. They tell you all sorts of things about their work and their story and their characters, and it is just wonderful. We are in a really delightful position.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, is there anything more enjoyable, more fun? Even I can be sometimes nervous and nerve-wracking, but just being able to just chat about the passion that, you know, stokes that fire in the heart on most days.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. So, well, actually, speaking of stoking the fire in the heart through motivation,
yep.
Another quick book I wanted to mention, that's also in our non-fiction genre, is called Campfire for the Heart. There we go. How was that for an unintentional
That's
segue?
Good. Nice,
Yay!
Nice segue.
So Campfire for the Heart is by author Natalie Stockdale, and it is described as follows. Do you ever wonder how other people cope with trauma, grief and tragedy? How other people rise from their lows? How other people find peace after pain? Campfire for the Heart answers these questions through powerful and compelling true stories of human resilience. By learning how other people have converted their darkest times to personal growth and success, you may discover how you too can learn and grow from your hardships, how you can be the hero of your journey or help others in theirs. The stories cover a vast range of life experiences, from the death of children, violence, Taliban terror and wrongful imprisonments, to droughts, bushfires, cyclones, diseases, injuries, disabilities and trauma from military, police and humanitarian work. So that is Campfire for the Heart, and I have to admit I am pretty obsessive with the biographies of people that, you know, have had extreme situations in their life that they've had to overcome, or didn't plan to need to overcome and do. I don't know, and it always helps me calibrate my life as well, because you know, I've got nothing to complain about sometimes when I read, you know, those biographies of people that have been incarcerated, in, you know, even though they're innocent, or have found themselves, you know, with severe physical injuries that has completely flipped their life upside down. All those things. I mean, it's endless, but it's the perseverance and the human spirit that really shines through, and it helps me, grounds me, I guess, a little bit when I read those books. But also, there's so much to gain from people that can find the positive in all these, you know, often negative situations. So could be a great, no, I'm not going to say could be, I'm sure it's a fantastic book. Campfire for the Heart by Natalie Stockdale. Okay, so we're about to step out of the Reader's Cafe, because we are going to talk with the wonderful and super passionate Conchita GarSantiago. But before that, I thought I'd just do a quick spotlight on the book that she's just released, which is, of course, the very special reason for having a chat with her. And that is A Cry for Home, which again falls under our historical fiction. I have spotlighted it before, but I thought I'd do it again just to give our listeners an idea of, you know, what the book's about and the discussions we had, because it's such a fantastic chat and passionate, but so many different avenues, so many things that I learned. But the book is called A Cry for Home. And A Cry for Home relates the story of a family living in Spain during the Spanish Civil War. So after the army has arrived to their town, they're forced to leave because Luis, the head of the family, is a well-known socialist and fears for his own life and the lives of his family, his wife, 2 young daughters and mother-in-law. So they start on a frightening journey where they have to face the horrors of the war. Lewis joins the Republican Army while his family are left in a place they believe to be safe. But danger comes to them and they have to run away, making it difficult for them to reunite with Lewis. Eventually, Lewis leaves the battlefield to go looking for his family. After many obstacles, they at last meet in Barcelona, where Lewis is still very actively fighting for the Republicans. By this moment, the family have lost their social status and wealth and live in a small, cramped flat. When revolution uprises in Barcelona, a sort of war inside another war, Lewis is concerned that what the leftists are doing is not good for the future Spain he believes in. The hostilities in Barcelona come to an end, but by then Lewis is done fighting. He limits his efforts attending secret meetings to discuss ways to prevent Franco's forces arriving at the east coast of Spain, where Barcelona is. At the beginning of the year 1939, it's clear that Franco has won, and, before the fascists arrive to Barcelona, Lewis and his family are forced to immigrate. They leave Spain to cross an inhospitable border into France, where they must stay until they are able to go further. So, pretty heavy subject, pretty epic and pretty, very, very big, and, with such a big backdrop that, it's the Spanish Civil War, you've got the World War II beginning to form, and so much there. So that is A Cry for Home by Conchita GarSantiago under our historical fiction. So I think I'll finish, I won't do a straw sound because I don't drink with straws, or do I, of my iced coffee milkshake.
Well, there you go. Well, I can pour myself.
Step back in.
I'd like to say I was pouring myself another gin, as I imagine, but it's actually tea. Sorry, peeps.
So after that little pep-up milkshake in the wonderful Reader's Cafe, so many good books, how many authors, how many different subjects did that cover just in that short brief time? That's just a sprinkling of what's on there. So definitely jump onto the Australian Book Lovers website. Books are being added all the time, and you can click Learn More on any title, which will take you to a dedicated page where you can get a full, more detailed description of the book. Not only that, a whole bunch of information about the author, links to their website if they have them, and of course the ability to purchase the book. And again, we don't sell the books, but we do have a button there that'll take you to wherever the author has chosen for or would like people to come to explore their works. So. Yeah. But saying that, speaking of authors, speaking of unique opportunities, this one was a very, very special opportunity. So I'd like to introduce the interview that I was so lucky to have, and I learned so much because this is in my little bubble here in Australia, and for half my life the only important thing was getting petrol money to get to the beach. To hear people's European stories is it's just so fascinating, and of course it did make me reflect upon, I guess, the way I ended up in Australia, worrying about how to fill up the panel van as opposed to being stuck in a war-torn country. And that's because members of my family, through my father and through my mother, they did escape the tragedies of war. So it was a good opportunity for me to reflect as well while I was talking to her. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, I would love for you to sit back and enjoy the wonderful interview with Conchita GarSantiago. So fantastic, listeners. Our next guest was born and raised in Spain, and not only studied in Spain, but her studies took her to London, where she obtained degrees at both Cambridge University and London Business School, before romance and a little bit of fate eventually brought her to Australia. Conchita GarSantiago, thank you so much for joining the Australian Book Lovers podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm happy and excited to be here.
Excellent. That's what we love. Now, Conchita, before we jump into all the things about your latest released book, A Cry for Home, growing up in Spain, then studying in Spain, London, moving to Australia, that's quite a bit of a journey and quite an interesting life there. So can you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and about your journey from Spain to Australia?
Sure. I studied public relations in Spain. I finished with good marks, but without much English. And I had a few works here and there, but nothing I could rely on. Then I was told that if I didn't speak very good English, I wouldn't find a good job in that field. I was aware at that moment that if I took evening classes to learn the language, I could be going to school for a long time and my English would never be very good. So I grabbed my suitcase and landed in the British capital as if I had parachute in. The same impossibility of communicating with the natives, the same insecurity of knowing where I was, how things work there, and where I had to go. My experiences and amazements in London did not end with getting to know the British metropolis. Accustomed to my hometown and its people, where we are all the same except for the gypsy race, London was an open window to the world for me. I met and interact with people of different races, religions, beliefs, and customs. As my English was progressing, so was the type of work. At the beginning, all I could do was cleaning and waitressing. By the end, I was working as a secretary for an Italian company. Not that it was too big, but it was better than cleaning, that's for sure. It was at that point that I met my husband, an Aussie man working in London. We got married, had a daughter, and after leaving London for Spain, where we lived for a few years, we came to Australia.
And what was just quickly, I'm just wondering what your first impression of Australia was when you landed here.
Oh, it was beautiful. I remember being on the plane. Because I was pregnant, we made the effort to have a seat in business class.
Oh, nice.
And I will never forget being sitting there, the plane inclining itself a little bit, and all this view of the beautiful beaches with the blue sky, and it was like a paradise. I was feeling I'm landing in a paradise. It was beautiful. And my parents-in-law were here, so it was, especially the first time when I came visiting, was visiting family. It happened that the family was on the other side of the wall, but it was visiting family.
I have to ask, you've eaten, obviously, Spain is famous for its food and London's probably, famous for a lot of high-class restaurants, but when you landed in Australia, not so much for food, but yeah. But in Australia, was that the first time you discovered a good old-fashioned meat pie?
No, I remember my mother-in-law cooked quite a lot of lamb chops. And I loved them. And what I did discover here was the roasted pumpkin. Up to that moment, I never knew that you could cook pumpkin.
Really?
I discovered it here. Yes.
Wow. Okay, that's a bit of an eye opener.
And I love it since then.
Oh, it's definitely one of the best. Absolutely. You can roast it, you can boil it, you can mash it. I love my pumpkins. But it's such a fascinating background, really, and you've had the opportunity, to live in different cities and, like you said, experience so many different cultures and so many different people, and you've got such a vast education background. But I'm wondering, through all of this, through the romance and marriage and family and moving and all that, when do you think it was that you started to feel that calling to be a writer?
Well, I think I have always had the attraction to write in the back of my mind. When I was little, I enjoyed a lot writing essays at the school, obviously. And then when I moved here and there, I was writing to friends and family at home. Mm-hmm. And they all love my letters. They all say, oh my God, it's like being there with you, seeing what you see and living what you live. And it was a very good feedback. So, I don't know. I think I realized in a way that I had a little bit of a flair for writing. And another thing that happened while I was in Spain, my mom passed away.
Oh.
And at that moment, I had so much inside my head, things I have never told her, situations where I did the wrong thing by her. You know, children are normally selfish with parents.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment they are gone, everything is in your head. And I was feeling like my head was growing and was about to explode. And I decided to write all those thoughts down. And you couldn't imagine. I mean, I felt so much lighter. It was really a therapy for me to do that. It made me feel very, very good.
Wow.
So writing has always been a little bit, as I said, on the back of my head. But it wasn't until I arrived to this country, when I arrived to live in, not when I arrived for the first time visiting. When I arrived to this country, I don't know why, because my parents-in-law lived in Kensington, and all I saw was, let's say, the city and around the city, and obviously the Blue Mountains and things like that. But then living here in the Hills District with all these beautiful houses, the beautiful roads. At first, when I saw it, I thought it was like in a fairy tale.
Wow.
The houses with the garden and the trees and the sky that you didn't have to turn your head 90 degrees to see the sky. I think it was all that what made me think for the first time that I could write. And I started to take writing courses. And from there, it all went on and on and on.
What a beautiful way to be called to writing, to be so overwhelmed with, I guess, nature's beauty, and obviously, some of the stunningly, I guess, quaint streets of the city and the fairy tale-like nature of the houses. But yeah, the big blue skies and, being in a completely different country and having, I guess, having that ability to capture all of that and all those letters back home. That's such a beautiful thing. But I know that we are here today to talk about A Cry for Home, but prior to A Cry for Home, I understand that some of your work has been included in some anthologies, and I know one recent anthology has just come out, and obviously, and I'm just wondering, can you tell us a little bit about the anthologies and what was the work that you had involved in those anthologies? What sort of style or stories were you telling?
Yeah, well, the first anthology was called Hope, and it was a few writers. I think we were 24 in total.
Oh,
wow. We met because this was in the middle of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So we met via Zoom, and we decided to write an anthology. We didn't even know each other. It was sort of a funny story. I mean, I suppose the man who was running all that, he knew some of the people. But anyway, we were 24 people writing in any genre that anyone wanted. In my case, I put two short stories there. One of them was based on my great-grandmother, who lost all her children and her husband.
Oh, wow. And
the second one was a product of my imagination from start to end. It was obviously fictional, about this tough man who was a freelance writer, and he witnessed not exactly a crime, but just the time before the crime. It was, I suppose, mystery, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe a bit of a thriller there as well.
Yeah, thriller.
Well, two very different pieces of work. One that sounds like a very intimate reflection on your grandmother's life, and then another one, a fictional mystery thriller. That's a big difference between the two.
Yeah, the thing is that I have ideas, and they came to my mind, and I start to write about that. And then I just work on developing that. The idea could be about a man who died in the middle of the street, or the idea could be about a little girl who has a lot of animals. I don't know. It's just ideas coming to my mind. It's not that I say, okay, let's write a thriller, or let's write a family saga, or let's write a love story. I never plan in that way. I always let ideas come to my mind. And as I said, I work on developing those ideas. So that's why I have some mysteries, and I have some sort of memoirs, and historical fiction.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and I just write it down. In the other anthology, for example, is titled Waving Words, with a subtitle Women About Women, and in there I wrote a sort of memoir from when I was going to spend summer with my aunt, but I changed so many things that it's not a memoir anymore. So I suppose it's based on my aunt's character and the way I react to that. And then it's a second story in that anthology that, again, from top to end, is a product of my imagination, about family secrets, abuse, and shame. And it's got a lot of tension and suspense.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously the imagination, there's just no limit to the imagination, but it is quite a skill to be able to, whatever story decides to be told at the time, that you can sort of delve into, well, I guess any genre that is that calls for the moment. That's really a good skill to have.
I don't know if it's a skill or it's, as we say in Spanish, the one who is apprentice of everything is professional of nothing.
That's a term familiar here. You have recently said, Conchita, that when it comes to your writing, that you are most proud of your latest book, which is titled, as I've mentioned before, as we've discussed before, A Cry for Home. Now, that is about a family living in Spain during the Spanish Civil War. I suspect that must have been, somewhat overwhelming, but obviously a huge subject to decide to write upon or write about. And I'd love to know, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know, when did you first, start to think about writing such an epic, about that, not so much the Spanish Civil War itself, but about a family's experience living in that particular time in history?
Well, I read a few books about the Spanish Civil War, and it caught my attention that they mention the Catalans. The Catalans are the people who live in the northeast in Spain, is touching a little bit of the border with France. And I read that when they saw that Franco was winning the war, they were thinking about giving their region to France. And I started to think about the consequences of that. I mean, if that had happened, obviously, Franco wasn't going to be content and just let it go. He could have sent all the men who had already come back from fighting to fight again. And this time, if Catalonia belonged to France, France could have got involved. And don't forget that the Spanish Civil War ended in April 1939, and the Second World War started in September the same year. If this second fighting had taken place the two wars would have overlapped, and most probably Spanish people could have been fighting for 10 years or more, because maybe even the Second World War could have been longer in time, since Franco could have supported Hitler with the Spanish army and also the Moroccan army, because Franco was in Morocco just before the Spanish Civil War. And, there are two places in Morocco, Ceuta and Melilla, that belong to Spain. And Franco was managing all that. So obviously, he could have incorporated the Moroccan army as well to fight in that war. So, I mean, it could have been a different history. So I decided to write about that. But then I realized that there are not many people in Australia who know about the Spanish Civil War. So,
myself included, Conchita, absolutely.
Yeah, well, we are on the other side of the war. I mean, it's not a strength that people don't know about that, because when I was little, all I knew about Australia is that they were kangaroos and that they were our antipodas. And I don't think I knew much more about Australia. I mean, it's so far from you, you never think about it. So anyway, I thought I would write an introduction, and I was writing. And when I realized I had over 50,000 words, so it was a book on its own. I said, okay, I'll finish this book and I'll write the other story later on. And that was how A Cry for Home was born.
Wow, that's a big introduction, 50,000 words, and next thing you know, kablamo, you've got, like you said, you've got the book there.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was searching for many things, and I was really into it. So I didn't really realize that I was writing a book on its own.
So a little bit of magic happened by the sounds of it, and that's the magic that comes when you, like I said, when you just become so passionate about what you're working on and writing, you can just be absorbed, and next thing you know, you look up and there's this whole piece there in front of you. But I guess that is the magic of writing. But you mentioned quite rightly that not a lot of people here in Australia are aware of the Civil War, and hearing you talk a little bit about it then. It was, it makes me realise, it increases my realisation of how the tiniest things can change history, or could have come so close to changing history, and the little tiny sparks that can eventually turn into those big fires that change the shape of our world. Being that I myself don't know anything about the Spanish Civil War, and I'm just wondering if you could maybe offer a really brief snapshot or a real quick description of when the conflict took place. I mean, you mentioned 1939 and what might have caused it, but is it something that you've already talked a little bit about it, but were there any other elements to it that I guess people like myself should know about that were really important for the war?
Yeah, well, there were many. Making a quick snapshot is about that.
That's a hard question, isn't
honestly, it? Honestly, the pre-war could fill volumes of books, but I'll try to do my best. As I said, I mean, the Spanish Civil War started on the 18th of July, 1936, and finished 1st April, 1939.
Oh, my apologies. See, I already got it wrong. I thought so it started in 1936.
36 start.
Mm-hmm.
39 finish. And in 1931, the king was forced to abdicate, and a Republican government was created, obviously. And it all started off with a great deal of optimism. The new government announced a reform of the armed forces, reorganizing church and state relationship, agrarian reform, addressing regional autonomy. So people were excited and happy because there were good points, and everybody wanted all that thing reformed. But what happened was quite the opposite. With the army, for example, there were reductions in all aspects. They reduced personnel by retiring them early, first voluntarily, then those who were considered superfluous could be dismissed without compensation.
Right.
They reduced military academies from 7 to 3, and the time of obligatory military service, and obviously money. How could be other ways? As Azaña, the president of the Republic, said once in the Spanish Parliament, there are no cannons, there are no guns, there are no munitions, and salaries remain low. So, was the army happy? No way. In 1932, General Sanjurjo initiated a coup, but it was poorly organized, so it turned out to be a disastrous failure. But even with that failure, they have the support of the right wing, the church hierarchy, landowners, monarchies, right-wing press, many people, and influential people. And then about the agrarian reform law, what happened was that in those moments, the men who work the land, they were working vast states, and they had very little protections over rights and pay. They often work for as long as 16 hours a day, and it was all wrong. Something had to be done in that aspect. So what the government did was to pass a law that consisted on redistributing land to peasants. Now, were the landowners were going to be happy about that? Obviously not. So they form political associations in support of property rights. They threaten to move their money out of the country, refuse salary increases to their workers, and even resorting to lockouts and violence. At the end, no one was happy. The landowners obviously weren't happy, and the workers weren't happy because they had put a lot of hope in that reform, and it didn't take place.
Been let down, yeah.
And in relation with the church, the state wanted to secularize the state. So the church could be depriving of all those privileges that they had enjoyed for centuries. And there was a lot of vandalism against churches. Some of them went on fire. A total disaster there.
Wow.
And regarding the autonomies, the Basque Country and Catalonia were the ones who wanted the separation from Spain in that moment. And it didn't happen. The Spanish government didn't allow it. So another part that was frustrated as well. And on top of all that, if you remember, the crash in 1929 didn't affect Spain as much as other countries, but any products that they were expropriating, I think I used that word. All the exports.
The exporting, yeah.
Yeah. The prices were reduced by half. So who was happy there? Absolutely nobody was happy. And eventually, in 1936, the military stood up in a coup, and this time was when the civil war was provoked, because people who were in favor of the government fought them. And I believe Franco obviously was the one who initiated it all. And I read somewhere that he thought it was going to be a matter of weeks, but it was a matter of 3 years.
Well, thank you so much for that, because that was a very in-depth description, and you've definitely shed a little bit of light for me. But isn't it fascinating? That whole unrest and disappointment, frustration that did eventually lead to the uprising, it seems like a world away. And they say that history is bound to repeat unless we learn from our previous mistakes. And yet, at the same time, looking at today's media and news, global news, I can't help but feel there's a lot of similar themes now running, in the sense of, people's cost of living becoming almost untenable, and, different sort of movements around the world, and obviously the current wars, that one of which, may not be officially declared a war yet, but also, one person in power thought maybe it was only going to be a couple of weeks, and here we are months later, and devastating results later. So I guess when it comes to, well, at least our position at the moment as human beings, I don't think we're doing a good job of learning from the past. That it certainly looks that way.
Learn what we don't have to do.
Exactly. But I mean, such a huge scope to incorporate into your book. I'm just curious, from a writing perspective, what was the research process like?
I did have to do a lot of research, because the subject of the Spanish Civil War is something that I have heard of all my life. My parents were little when the war started, and they talk a lot about it. And they talk about the day-to-day struggle, battles, names of generals, names of politicians. And it was all very familiar to me. But obviously, when you are going to write a book, you cannot rely on that. You have to have the facts accurate. For example, you couldn't say General Mola. I heard that name many times, and I think they were streets dedicated to him. So it was a familiar name with me. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't say, for example, General Mola led the Battle of Ebro. And it happens that the Battle of Ebro was in 1938, and he had died in 1937.
Yeah, that could be a little bit of that.
Exactly. So you do have to research. I mean, having heard names and things obviously makes the researching easier, because you know where you have to go. You know what you have to look for. But still, you have to research everything. You have to study all the dates and the battles and the day-to-day struggle, everything. Because if we are in a conversation, I could say, oh yeah, I think this, I think that. But if I'm going to write a book, it's going to be there, written for everybody to see and everybody to analyze. And people, imagine if I had done that. I mean, people would say, well, don't read this book. I mean, it's full of mistakes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it is easy to say something because it's quickly disappears, within a conversation by the sounds of other voices. But when you write something down, it's kind of there forever and for everyone to scrutinise and look at, if they wanted to scrutinise it in that way. We mentioned it's a very complex story, and I guess I suspect that A Cry for Home, you've written it from the perspective of a family, so there's got to be a lot of emotional themes there and a lot of story arcs and directions and big changes to the lives and the experiences of the family and across as they cross borders and have to deal with the outcome and results of the war. So there's a lot there, but I'm wondering when it comes to the the writing of it and going into, you know, all the complexities of the Civil War, and then exploring all those emotional areas of the family and those devastating effects of the war. Did you find, you know, when you wrote the book and the process of writing A Cry for Home, did you learn anything surprising about yourself? So, you know, is the Conchita who started writing A Cry from Home different from the Conchita who finished writing A Cry for Home? And what do you think you learned in between?
Well, I suppose the great surprise was that I could write a book on my own.
That's a good surprise to have.
Just because of that, the Conchita who finished the book was happier than
Whoa, now there's no holding you back.
Yeah, but no, I mean, seriously, I didn't think anything had changed on me, but then I thought again and I said, yeah, I mean, before I wrote the book, I like history, especially modern history, but I wasn't so passionate about it. I didn't really care what people would say about history or whatever. Now I do. And one of the things that happens, for example, is that I get really angry when people try to change history. They try to change the facts. For example, I have heard many times that thanks to the Russians, we got rid of the Nazis. Excuse me? Stalin made a pact with Hitler in August 1939. He came to the other side just because Hitler invaded Russia. If this hadn't happened, I bet Stalin would have remained with Hitler, because Stalin wanted part of the Europe that Hitler was taking. And another thing that happened is that Churchill wrote a few letters to Stalin asking him to join the Allies and warning him about Hitler. And Stalin not only ignored Churchill, but he also showed the letters to Hitler. So when I hear things like this, I get really angry. And I said, study the history. I mean, when I was writing this book, I was looking at a lot of documentaries about the Spanish Civil War, but also about the Second World War, because in a way, they are a little bit connected. And on the other hand, my initial motivation was to write about that imaginary story. So I was searching a lot about in this as well. And now when I hear people trying to change facts or even to delete the history, I mean, some people think that history is like the computer. You press the delete button and that didn't happen. Excuse me, it doesn't work like that. So I suppose writing this book has made me more passionate about all these things with people and respecting history. I mean, there has been a lot of horrors in history, and we all wish it hadn't happened. But as you said before, we have to learn what happened in history. Otherwise, we are condemned to repeat it. What's going to happen if people change the facts?
Then there's no learning.
I can imagine. And I mean, writing this book made me much more aware of all this and much more passionate. And before maybe I hear somebody saying the Russians were the ones who helped us with the Nazis, we won the war because of them, I probably would have shrunk my shoulders and forget it. But now I can't.
I mean, you obviously sound like a very passionate lady to begin with. So the fact that you're even more passionate now about history from doing that, is because I guess it has to come with some pretty eye-opening realizations, I guess, because history, as I've admitted, isn't one of my strong subjects. But when I do start to look deeper into, elements of certain, points in history, then it really does, become as a bit of a shock. And often what I discover to be, as far as I can tell, true, it may often be a little bit different to what I've grown up to believe, if that makes sense. And so then I realise that every time I discover a new truth about a particular period in history or a particular event in history, I have to recalibrate, and I have to understand that maybe, all the thinking I've had up until that point may have been a little bit based on incorrect information, or, like you said, just something somebody says rather than looking right into it. And it's a very, I think it's a good way to sharpen, I guess, one's awareness of the world, is to not look at just the moment that is now, but to educate yourself on the history and the events of the past. So definitely something I have to do more of.
Yeah, obviously, they say that history is written by the winners.
Correct, yes.
But, when you see the documentaries, when you see people, photographs, movies, you cannot doubt that. It has to be the reality. And another thing that I found out is that now there are many letters written by Churchill and other important people during that time, and they say a lot, and they make you realize how things were going on, and to doubt that, if we start to doubt all the documentaries and all the things that we have there written, then don't bother about learning history.
Yeah, I think, similarly in the past and today, what the government tells us is happening and what is really happening behind the scenes is no doubt two different stories, or at least vastly different stories. Just like we discover, in the past, what was said at the time by governments, and then, with over time and freedom of information, we discover that different things were, afoot underneath, which at some points that makes sense because, at times of war or potential war, governments don't want to declare what they're doing to the world.
Yeah, that's true.
So I get that. But, it's such an interesting time now because, footage from, the 40s, the 50s, the Korean War and Vietnam, and going back to World War II, even going back to some of the footage from World War I and photographs, they can still be edited. They can still, have elements taken out before they're released. So it can still be somewhat skewed.
Well, I suppose that's true. But for example, in that fact that, was it, oh God, I'm very bad for name, Ribbentrop or something like that? The minister of Hitler, the one who flew to Moscow to meet up with Stalin. They are pictures of the two men, and they are movies of the two men meeting, shaking hands, and signing papers.
You don't get, you can't deny something like that. But the reason I brought that up is because I think it's so fascinating that the time we're living in now. Because yes, we can definitely trust footage and photographs from the past. It's just that I think that sometimes there's footage and photographs that we haven't been able to see yet. But now with today's technology, depending on where it is and what's happening and who's there at the time, footage of an event can be uploaded to the internet almost instantaneously, and before anyone can touch it, it's multiplied and shared, and so there's no way of lying about that event because it's there in an instant. And I think we're living in unique times, and let's see if we can learn a little bit from history and incorporate that with today's technology, where it makes things a little bit more tricky for governments to say, oh no, that didn't happen, while at the same time the video is already out showing it did happen. So very interesting times. But speaking of interesting times, within the novel, obviously the family, at one point is forced, or members of the family have to, basically leave behind all that they've known. They have to travel to another country under really difficult circumstances. I'm always fascinated about, having to start again in another country. It's not something I've ever done. I mean, I've visited other countries, but visiting as a tourist is a completely different situation to, landing and starting a new life in another country and maybe learning to speak a new language and, absorb a different culture all around. You yourself have done that. You've done it. From Spain, you've landed in England and started a life and education there, and then from there to Australia. Once again landed in a brand new country and had to not necessarily start a brand new life, but continue your life in a different country. And so it makes me wonder. When it came to writing about that, the family's difficulties and experiences of finding themselves in a new country. Do you think it was made a little bit easier by the fact that you had to do something similar? Obviously not under as dark circumstances, but still you've moved from your home in Spain and now on the other side of the world. Do you think was there any elements or surprises about starting your life in Australia that surprised you that was so different to Spain, like something about the culture? And also, did that whole experience help you write about the family in the book, in A Cry for Home?
Bear in mind that the story I'm talking about in the book is in 1939, and a family moving in that time and with nothing in their pockets is very different.
Yeah.
When I moved here in 2007, and I was with my Aussie husband, so he was at home and I was with him. So it wasn't the same.
No, it wasn't the same, but still you had to learn a life in a different culture.
Yeah, well, it's a different culture. I have always said that living in England prepared me to live in this country because, for nothing that Australians are descendants from British, or at least in the majority, or at least it used to be when they start Australia as we know it today, when they set the basis and everything. So I didn't see much difference in the style of life, in the mentality, in the laws and things like that between England and Australia. For me, it was more of a shock, to say in a way, going from Spain to England than coming here. To start with, as you mentioned, when I went to England, my English was, hello, how are you? My name is Conchita. I come from Spain, and hardly anything more. So, and I didn't know anybody there. I didn't have anybody. I was totally alone. So that was a big shock. But then when I came to here to start with, speaking the language is a huge advantage. And then, well, in some aspects, in the way friendly people living more in the streets and all that is a little bit more alike to Spain than it is to England.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I suppose, I remember, this is just an anecdote, but I suppose they are things that crash on you. I remember just before coming here, we were in Spain and we went to see a medieval festival. And it was there on the street, on the open, and anybody could go there and participate as much or as little as they wanted. And the following year, we came here, and in Sogran Road was the same festival, medieval festival. And we said, okay, come on, let's come back there. We have a lot of fun, blah, blah, blah. And as soon as we arrived, they asked us $35, I think it was, each one.
Yes,
and we said,
of course there's an entry fee.
This bit is different. And I suppose in the whole, I think Australian is more business-like.
Oh, wow.
In Spain, we are more relaxed in that way, more exotic. We do things, come on, let's go. And we are all there. But here, and I believe that as well is very recently, for example, my husband tells me that when he was little, he went to Melbourne, near Melbourne, to see the penguins. And you could go there on your own, sit wherever you want. I mean, obviously, nobody could let you mistreat the animals, but it was very free. Now it's all very structural. You have to sit here, you have to be silenced, you have to walk here, you have to, and you have to pay.
But saying that, now that you bring up penguins, oddly enough, we have a small island here, about 45 minutes drive from where I am, that growing up you could go on any time, and you still can go on the island any time, and there used to be colonies of penguins all over it, and it was fantastic. And you'd go at night with a torch and you'd check out all the groovy little fairy penguins, and they're just about all gone now, and that's just due to too many people. So, but yet if you go to Kangaroo Island,
I agree that you have to protect it a little bit, but it was a little bit too much.
But yes, but when it comes to festivals, you can definitely bet that it's all about business.
Yeah,
but still some fun free festivals. You just have to come down to Adelaide, I think, for the Fringe maybe, and enjoy yourself next March, February, March, and celebrate under the sun. But no, a huge congratulations for releasing Cry for Home, sorry, and obviously you've talked about your short stories and the different sort of tales you've told, and some non-fiction, some fiction. Are you working on anything at the moment, and what would it be if you are?
Well, I translate a cry for home into Spanish.
Oh, and how long did that take you? A
few months. Obviously, all I have to do was to translate, and it's easier than to make up the story. The writing A Cry for Home took me a whole year. I started in June 19 and finished in June 20. And to translate it, I think I started at the beginning of the year, maybe March. Can't remember very well, but I finished about a month ago.
Wow. Conchita, I have to admit, I am super, super jealous, because I don't speak another language fluently, so I'm jealous on that front, and that's partly my fault. But two, the ability, and just from my perspective, the idea of being able to write a book, that's fantastic, but then to be able to essentially rewrite it in another language and have to adapt each sentence, knowing that some words don't cross over that easy, or expressions have to be changed a little bit. And then to be able to read the same story in a different language, which may have different little tiny, connotations here and there, and different ways of describing things, that is pretty damn magical. So I do tilt my proverbial hat.
It's funny what you say, because people were telling me, in Spanish would be much easier for you. But it happened that I missed some of the English words. Can you believe that? I was going to translate, and the English word came to my mind, and I couldn't find any Spanish word that would match exactly the meaning of that word. And it was funny in that way, because my language is Spanish, and I was there missing English words.
Wow. Yeah, I see that. I just can't wrap my head around. What do you do when you come up with a sentence or a word that doesn't have a direct translation? Do you find yourself removing the sentence? Do you rewrite it in a completely different way in Spanish? What do you do?
I have to confess that I did help myself with things like Traduca and DeepL is a translator as well. I mean, obviously, they help you. They don't do the work for you.
No,
but at some moments, like the one you described, it was very useful, because I was trying to I translated, I wrote it in Spanish, and then I read it, and I said, no, this is not what I want to say. So sometimes these apps did help. Some other times make it even more difficult because I still didn't like what they translate.
Wow.
But
that's really interesting, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, does this mean that when do you expect the Spanish version of A Cry for Home to be available? And does it mean a trip to Spain for you to celebrate and maybe go back home for a little bit?
A trip to Spain has been in our mind for a long time now, because the last time we went was 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to go, but it was always something stopping us from going. And in January 2020, we said, okay, it's this year. We have to go this year.
Yeah.
In May, we'll go. Obviously, it didn't happen.
No.
We were in the middle of the pandemic. So now I want to go, but again, I hear so many disaster stories in airports all around the world that I say, oh my God, it's going to be so difficult. So I don't know. We want to go in 2023. We want to go to Spain, and I want to have my books printed and to sell them there. But as I said, I don't know if it will be possible, because it's becoming quite difficult to travel by plane now.
Yes, it is a little bit, and hopefully things settle down, because I know a lot of people that have family and loved ones living in other countries. After this huge, well, when I say huge, from a perspective of the world all experiencing the same thing. The pandemic has probably made a lot of people really ready to jump on planes, and the logistics just haven't been able to keep up. But still, it would be a wonderful experience to be stepping off the plane in your home country with a copy of your book, which you wrote in a different country, but then translated back to Spanish. And I think that would deserve a huge glass of champagne once you get there.
I am really, really looking forward to that.
Excellent. And for, so much writing there, so many skills, and obviously such a huge achievement and not to mention a whole lot of work to write a book in what was once a foreign language to you, and then translate it all back. And the research you've done for A Cry for Home, the themes you've managed to work within, complex historic moments, I guess. When it comes to writing, have you, through all that, there's a lot of seriousness, obviously, but is there any fun discoveries you've made about the process of writing? And are there any really cool hints or tips that you might be able to share with our listeners out there that are also in the process of writing or about to pick up the pen and try to make put together a masterpiece?
Playing with words is fun.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that's for a T-shirt.
I don't want to be a Sheldon Cooper. Fun with flags. And me, fun with words. But it is funny. It's funny choosing words. I don't know, at least it is for me. And making stories is fun as well. You can play to be a little bit a god. This one is going to be Spanish. This one is going to have a romance. This one is going to have to work hard. It's playing God a little bit. And
that's a
for
cool
me,
way to
it's
put
all
it.
funny. On the life of your characters, a tip that I would share would be dive on the life that your characters are living while you are writing them. Don't be detached. Don't look at it from above. Look at it as you are living the lives of the characters.
That is a really good tip, and because I think it's easy to try and sometimes as writers, I think we all go through a point where, should I say, a learning curve where essentially the characters are at one point just pieces on the board, and you move them, and this happens to them, and that happens to them. But then slowly, like you said, you have to delve into them. You have to become the characters. You have to zoom down to that board and actually jump into a new set of eyes with a new set of emotions and new experiences. And that's the wonderful part about writing, whether it's fictional or non-fictional characters or people that you're writing about. It's just a unique opportunity to look at the world in a whole different way.
Yeah, I see it like that. Yes. Well, I wanted to bring together all the short stories that I wrote, and maybe to do an anthology on my own, and another one with all the crime stories that
cool.
I've written. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've got quite a few crime ideas bubbling away there in the imagination.
Yeah, I have a few projects. I don't know how they will go. And also, don't forget that when I start to write this book, the idea was to write about the imaginary history. So I want to do that as well.
Oh, so that was my next question. Is historical fiction or still going to remain something that, one of your passions, or the different genres you'll always be exploring? But so you definitely want to go back and revisit some historical fiction writing?
I like history fiction. And one thing that is good about writing historical fiction is that you have the plot in there. Obviously, then you have to adapt your characters to the plot and make the drama around them. But half of the plot is there, and that's good in a way. On the other way, obviously, you have to work harder because, as I said before, you have to have the facts really spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. I never thought of it like that way. Historical fiction, you've got kind of the platform there ready to sort of just add your story to, but then at the same time that you have to make sure that platform, every nut and bolt, is exactly as it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just press it yourself much better.
Well, I definitely look forward to hearing about some of your crime stories when they come out, if they come out in an anthology, or if, like A Cry for Home, you start working on one story and next thing you know, it becomes a novel on its own. You just never know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a big surprise.
Well, I have no doubt there's going to be many more surprises to come. But Conchita GarSantiago, thank you so much for being a part of the Australian Book Lovers podcast. And, I wish you nothing but success with A Cry for Home and with the anthology, possible new anthology that's coming out, and for any of you writing moving forward. And just a huge congratulations on what is a massive feat, not only to write a book in a language that wasn't your primary language, to translate it, and of course, besides those two huge mountains to climb, tackling such a huge epic, sweeping epic, such an important part of history, and what is probably a very complicated part of history. So congratulations on that book. I know that historic fiction listeners out there will absolutely love it. So that is A Cry for Home, which can obviously be found under our historical fiction genre on the website if you want to run out and grab a copy. But once again, Conchita, thank you so much for an unbelievably wonderful chat, and you really have opened my eyes to a little bit more of history. Now I have a very, very brief but a little bit more understanding, far more understanding than I had before I spoke to you about the Spanish Civil War, and that means I have a better appreciation and an understanding of the world around me. And so for that, I thank you very much, and I just want to thank you for being such a wonderful guest on the show, and I really do hope we have to have this opportunity again in the near future.
Thank you very much for having me. I have enjoyed a lot. I like talking to you because it's very easy to talk to you. You make it all flowing very well, and you help people like me who are not used to interviews to answer your questions in an easy way, to make it great.
Well, I thank you, because it's guests like yourself that help me develop the skills to talk to people, because I have the opportunity to talk to such fantastic and interesting and wonderful people just like yourself. And that's a huge gift to me as well.
Oh, God, can I take you with me everywhere I go? So you can say that everywhere?
Oh, of course. For a small fee, I'll develop a special sized backpack and you can strap me on your shoulder. No, but it really is true.
Wonderful having a voice like yours in the back of your mind saying, "You are so good, you are so good."
Well, I wish I could just tell myself that. Because I have so much, like all of us, the confidence. Sometimes a person can sound confident. Doesn't mean we're always as confident as we sound. I've got to try and, I guess, improve my self-confidence a bit too. So, but no, and it's from, every time I talk and learn, I really have learned so much, about history today, Conchita, and that really does change a little bit of the way I look at the world.
It was never my intention to make a book in history, a history lesson, but I'm glad that people can understand about what happened in Spain.
Yeah, and of course, it keeps things alive. It keeps the lessons that we need to learn alive. And of course, Cry for Home isn't just an historical document. It is, the story of a family, embroiled in all that. So there's a great adventures and important themes to be found for anyone who wants to delve both into historical information, but also into the human and emotional elements of what it would be like to be living in that point in time in history. But for now, I really hope we start to see some sort of evidence that we can learn from history. But I guess an answer to that is we'll just have to wait and see. But in the meantime, the invitation is always there, Conchita, to come down to the southern land or southern part of the land down here in South Australia when the summer starts, because lots of festivals here and a lot of them with no entry fee, and that means you can come and have a ball.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Conchita, for a really interesting interview and covered some very deep subjects, and one that I was interested in and did a little bit more reflecting on was about, reading, writing and reflecting on war and how difficult that must be when there's been that personal involvement or that personal connection, and then how important it is to tell those stories. Because I'm reading an article interestingly by the Illinois Library Association. Thank you for hosting that. And it talks about the literature of war dating from the Iliad, or stories told in the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Of course.
All of those things. So war has always been spoken about. And the view of war changes constantly, in society. And I have to admit, I don't know much. I didn't know much about the Spanish Civil War, except perhaps that there was a civil war in Spain. And, Conchita's stories are very much helping to make sure that there is the human side of those stories written, which reminded me of that quote. I'm sure that you've heard of it, which is, history is written by the victors. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it is attributed to Winston Churchill, but apparently, strictly speaking, it wasn't him. It was something earlier. And although we could say yes, because we are in Australia just experiencing that, history of Australia being written by the colonialists in the last 200 years has not really taken into account all of the Australian wars, which were the wars that the Indigenous First Nations Australians who were here before the colonists are really from their side. And it's only now that we are bringing the alternate side, or the, balancing the stories from the colonists with some of the First Nations stories and the history and their side of that conflict. And I wonder, why do you think it is that we like to or need to have stories about wars? Is it a human thing?
I think there's a morbid fascination, definitely. And I think, I don't know, thinking about it a little bit, I can't help but feel that, when the war is chaos, and it's it's really the epicenter of when all law breaks down, when all morality breaks down. And I think as human beings, to be able to not experience it, but to look into it, whether it's through biographies, documentaries, reading, technical non-fiction, war manuals, descriptions, whatever the medium might be. I think it's the fascination with what happens when stability is completely removed and there is no rule, there is no law, there's just destruction. I mean, I myself am fascinated by it. I've never been a military buff as far as I couldn't talk about specific wars. Obviously, World War One, World War Two. I've heard of the Spanish Civil War. I learned a lot about it. Having that unique ability to chat with Conchita. What I do find interesting is if I do find myself going down the rabbit hole of war, either I like the biography of somebody who was there, because then usually they're pretty frank about what happens. And that's how you definitely find different narratives by, say, a soldier's memoir versus the media releases. I think that's really important if you can hunt down, I think, either soldier memoirs, or I know there's been a lot of great, like in the late 80s, I suppose, there was a lot of the international journalists that would go right down to the front lines, and back in the day, I used to read a lot of them. They would be pretty down the line on no side, so they'd just tell it as it was. But not only that, I think, but for me, the wars, it's atrocious, and it's like anything. We if there's a fight, we're going to look at it. But it's the little rumblings, the little seeds that lead to the wars that I find fascinating.
Right.
Like with Conchita talking about the farmers and stuff suddenly realizing that they were working long hours, but they were getting less money and less, and I think, well, is that something we're starting to see today again?
Yeah.
What signs? I mean, it's easy to identify war when it's there. Like, okay, the situation in Ukraine right now, it's happening. So you would call that a war or some kind of war. Politically, I don't know what the correct term is, but it's how do we see one coming, and how do and prepare for it?
Because it's really just a single, like an assassination or whatever, like the invasion. Yeah, as you say, in the Ukraine. And I found what was interesting, there's a story, or a short story, that was an article published in, I think it was, I can't remember what the magazine was, anyway, How to Tell a True War Story by a guy called Tim O'Brien. And the quote from him is, "War is hell, but that's not the half of it, because war is also mystery and terror and adventure and courage and discovery and holiness and pity and despair and longing and love. War is nasty, war is fun, war is thrilling, war is drudgery." And I thought, wow, that is, when you think about it, because it's not something that generally would attract me to read a war story. I'm happy to read about a story and a military action in space in the future when that kind of divorces it from reality. But to think about war stories that are historical fiction, that are reporting or reflecting on things that we know have happened, that real people have died, that real people have been injured, that real people have been involved in that aggression, it's completely different. But I thought, it's not black and white.
And look, for me, I think reading stories like, if you got the time to sit down and read Cry for Home, or there's so many tales of families that were torn apart and still continue today. But any tales or stories or reflections or biographies that can give us that insight a little bit more into the horrors, the tragedies, the triumphs, the rise of the human spirit, all those different things, ultimately give us. I think they're a definite necessary tool as far as reading them to know ourselves better, because all the horrors that happen in war is ultimately human beings that prior to the war they would have been, running a shop or, running an accounting firm or working here or working there. And then suddenly, especially in the case with the world wars, you've got a whole vicious side of humanity coming out on all sides. And so we can't forget that. We have to know that that's simmering somewhere within us all, whether it be as a culture, a society, even as an individual. And if we dislike what we see now when we look back, then hopefully that's enough. I don't know. It's really weird because, it's not like a bunch of monsters invaded the planet Earth back, say, in World War II, for example. It was some politicians that's just drummed up and somehow, as if by magic wands, turned normal human beings into killing machines. How? Why? So that's where I'm fascinated to find out what the seeds are. When you see the political news each day, I think, I wonder if is that going to be what we'll look back on history as the trigger for World War III? And it could be something so trivial that we'd overlook it today in a news article. But I don't think it's ever the big things. The big things are it's when there's no turning back. But saying that, again, I am not a war historian. I don't know much about military stuff. All I do know is that usually the people that start the fight, they don't do the fighting, which to me is just ridiculous. So I don't know what the fight is now anyway. If it's 2023, everything's on the internet. What are you fighting for?
So thank you to Conchita for
razzing it up
and getting the book and making us think about those things. So definitely.
And not only that, a huge congratulations huge congratulations to Conchita for doing. I'm in awe to write the book in a language that wasn't her first language, and then go to the process of translating it back.
Yes,
that's amazing, and that's I don't think I'll ever do anything like that in my lifetime. You never know, but wow.
You never know. Yeah. So there you go. Thank you to Conchita.
Yeah, thank you, Conchita, and look forward to seeing new work coming from her soon. We hope.
Yes.
Well, after all that war talk and me getting, because I had that supersonic caffeine milkshake in the Reader's Cafe, and then got pepped up about war. How about we wind down in the Writer's Lounge with a cocktail or a stiff drink on ice and sit back and enjoy the non-smoky atmosphere, but soft lighting. And I believe there may be you had the opportunity to join someone a little bit in there as well. So let's dive on in.
So, Darren, while we're in the Writer's Lounge, I thought I would introduce you to what I am doing at the moment in my own writing, because we are a bit slack. We get caught up in, not slack, we get sidetracked and distracted by everybody else and all the things that they're doing. So,
but of course, we write as well.
We do write as well, yes, indeed. So I thought I'd share with people what I'm doing at the moment, which is editing the second book of my fantasy series, which is the Opal Dreaming Chronicles. And at the moment I am taking the fabulous feedback by Natasha O'Connor, who's brilliantly gone through my story and loved it as much as I have, which is just amazing.
Good.
So if you can
and
find
because we've had
like
Natasha on the show previously too.
Yes. And so what I'm doing is incorporating all of Tasha's feedback, and then once I've done that, I'm putting the chapter through Pro Writing Aid. So I don't know if you've ever used Pro Writing Aid, but it's like a grammar checker and those kind of things. That really is a professional writing aid, and you can choose the kind of voice it is, if it's a fiction, if it's a academic journal, or those kind of things. And so it can then highlight for you not only where you've repeated back and won, and what are my favourite ones? I can't think. There's a few words that I use way too much. They're my comfort words. But it can also say that in casual writing this would be okay, but if you're doing an academic one, this might need to be tightened up, or they can offer you alternate things if you just write, they had a good time. Did they have a good time, or a great time, or an adventurous time, or a stupendous time, so that you actually think about a little bit more depth and flow in your adjectives and all of those kind of things. So it's very helpful. And yes, it does cost. I don't know if there is a free one.
No, because you put me onto it.
Cool.
Yeah, I think, look, for me, it's the perfect mix between, it's AI essentially, but AI in the proper use, in the sense of it allows you to, the AI looks at your prose in a way, obviously different to you, but in a very analytical way, and it points out stuff. Of course, you make the decision whether you want to change it or not.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It definitely highlights maybe some, like you said, some words that you use repeatedly without recognising. Like I don't know how many times I've told, even just talking here, I've got a fantastic book. I'm going to have to get rid of fantastic because there's much better words.
Or say to yourself, only once per chapter, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a great tool. It's a fantastic
it is
tool.
And like with any tool, the important thing is that it is just a tool. It's not your writing. Don't lose your own voice by saying, oh, I should say it like this. Remember that the way you say it is the way your character is saying it. You know, that's important. So don't lose your voice, but use something like ProWriting Aid. And I think the Hemingway editor, there's a free version of that, which is a similar, perhaps not quite as complex. And I used that before I found ProWriting Aid. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm about 30% through this edit. And yeah, I'm not really cutting any words. Sometimes I go, oh yeah, and I cut like 1,500 words, and then by the time I sort of reshape the story, I really added about another 500. So yeah, it's not a great cutting tool for me as such. What are you up to in your writing?
I am currently at the final stages of another. Well, I'm just doing a few short psychological horrors, I guess, or supernatural horrors. So I've just been working on one that's been super fun to write, but I've just got a little tiny bit to finish it, and then that will be a production of a short audio. I've already got one wrapped up. I actually dug out one of my original short stories that were published under Paroxysm Press. I think there was 5 stories in the Paroxysm Press. The book was called Paroxysm Press. It was the first one by the company. And so I actually recorded one of them there and turned it into a bit of an audio production, and then wanted to write a brand new one while I'm just finding times to delve into the old imagination. Just got to work got to fine tune how I want to get down the climax for the sequel to Hallucigenia Project, which is Godless. So it's simmering in the background. But
could you
it's
get on with that, please? I'd like to read it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's good to just flex out a couple of things as far as doing this new stuff. It helps me go back with a bit of fresh eyes.
Yeah.
So that's been good. And not only that, I'm really enjoying now, changing the medium a little bit, and looking forward to. I've already written a bit of a score for this short story, a bit of piano, and it's going to be some dark cellos, and maybe some bubbling seawater, and it's going to be fun. So, and that will actually, I'm hoping to have that finished in the next week or two, and so there may be a couple of audio shorts coming to the show very soon. But yes, and it's good fun writing, and as I'm writing it, imagining the sounds that I'll be putting and using as far as the soundscape or the music or the atmosphere. Something different. Yeah, a little bit different. Yes.
Nice.
But speaking of writing and all the fun stuff that comes with it,
yes,
I think you had a little secret lounge at some point with somebody who had maybe been bringing in some writing tips.
Indeed I did. So we have spoken with KM Allan, who is the author of the Black Birch series, so The Beginning, The Dark Half and The Ritual are the first 3 novels, and she's working on the last in the series. But Kate, as with many writers, also does other writing. She doesn't just write novels. She has quite a popular blog where she talks about the writing process and writing tips and tricks and all of those kind of things to help writers learn skills that they may not necessarily know about. So Kate very happily agreed to drop in and talk to us about some of her top blog tips, and she writes sort of once a fortnight or so, fairly regularly, and you can find her writing online. We'll tell you that at the end. But yes, let's jump in and listen to KM Allan's top blog tip for this episode. Australian book lovers, we have a fabulous new segment for the podcast today, and I'm delighted to say that we have prolific Australian author KM Allan. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Hello.
So Kate is not only an author of brilliant YA novels, she has the Black Birch series, The Beginning, The Dark Half and The Ritual, and she's working on number 4. We wanted to work faster, but that's okay. But Kate is also a blogger. How long have you been blogging, Kate?
About 5 years. It'll be 6 years this year.
And so are there, hundreds of blogs under your belt by now?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I started out blogging sort of once a week, and now I do it every fortnight. So yeah, pretty regular content there.
Yeah. And the content is why we've got you on, because of course we've chatted to you about Black Birch, and we'll chat to you more when the next one is out. But you were going to share with us just a quick tip on blogging. So tell us about your top tip for this week.
All right, well, the latest blog that I have just released is on time blocking, which is adding that to your writing routine so that you can obviously get some progress done. Because I don't know about you, but I tend to spend a lot of my time on social media when I should be writing, which I'm sure a lot of people seem to do. And so, recently I added some time blocking to my routine, which is where you pretty much decide on the task that you want to do, work out how much time you have to do that task, and then you basically sit and do that task for that time. And it sort of sounds really simple and obvious, but like I said, if you sort of sit down to write at your computer and you go, oh no, I'll just check Twitter for 5 minutes, or I'll look on Instagram for 10 minutes, and before you know it, it's been an hour and you've pretty much wasted all your time doing other things. But with time blocking, because you've got to do that task and you've got to do it for the set amount of time, you just sit and you do it.
And then it's done, and you can feel that that's a tick off your list.
Exactly. Yeah, I find it so helpful to do, especially sort of get a little timer out. You go, all right, I'm going to be writing for the next half an hour. That's all I'm going to do. You set your timer and you go and you do it. And it makes such a difference.
Do you set breaks in your work as well? Like
Yes.
in your calendar? Yeah.
Yep, definitely have breaks and everything like that. Because as you also do as well, we get up at 6 a.m. and we join the 6 a.m. writers on Twitter.
Yep.
So I know for that hour at least I'm going to be writing. So you get up to do that. So you do that for the hour, and then obviously you go about your morning routine. And then when I can get back to my desk, then I'll sit down for another hour or so, work out what I'm doing, set the timer, do the task, then move on to the next one.
It is, as you say, sort of common sense, but people don't always do common sense things. It's not
Yes.
common practice. I think that Brendan Burchard says that he's the leadership guru guy, and just sitting down and blocking time. I mean, if you saw my calendar, you go, oh yeah, she does that too, because I like the colours and order and that kind of thing.
Yes.
While I might be a pantser in terms of writing, I like to be really organised, and that's my project management, head making me do those things. So yeah, very effective.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Excellent.
I'm the same.
Yeah. So Kate, if people want to read the rest of that blog, where do they go?
They go to kmallan.com, which is KMALLAN.com, and then it's all on there. It'll be sort of the first blog that pops up because it's the latest one.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, and a lot of authors do have other writing than their books, and you've chosen blogging to be, I guess, the second way to reach out to an audience. So what made you choose blogging?
Well, I sort of, before I really got into seriously writing, I was working for a hairstyling website, and I was writing articles for them all about hair care and hair colours and things like that. So I was sort of used to doing that.
Yeah.
And so when I stopped working there, I thought, well, I really liked writing the articles about topics that I was interested in. And obviously I'm interested in writing. And when I started taking it more serious, I thought, oh, maybe I'll start writing about writing. And so I just started from there, and thankfully a lot of people seem to like it. So.
Yes, they do, because you do have some brilliant writing tips, which is fantastic. So Australian book lover authors, get yourselves on the internet. Go to kmallan.com and follow and subscribe to Kate's blog, because it is extremely useful. I know I printed out a number of checklists and various bits and pieces and thought, that's exactly what I needed to hear, that reminder again. So thank you, Kate, for the blogging, and thanks for dropping in.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll see you again. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, you got lucky there, Veronica, being able to chat with KM Allan, and thank you so much for the writing tips, and
Yes,
I'm
and
hoping we get a few more tips coming on a regular basis. I suspect
Yes.
there just might be.
Kate has agreed to give us a couple more. So if you want to read
excellent.
the whole blog, please jump onto Kate's website and have a read, because they are short but really packed with information, which is super helpful.
Excellent. Well, I'm getting a little bit too cozy in this writer's lounge, so I could easily stay here and order a double. So I'm going to slink my way back upstairs,
Yep.
and maybe I'll meet you back in the podcast.
Sounds good.
I'd like to chat about some quotes.
Okay.
Okay, Veronica, episode 75. We've touched on a few different subjects. We've covered quite a few books covering a lot of different ground. Had an amazing chat with Conchita, and had an awesome chat in the Writer's Lounge. And now I'm thinking it's time. I'd love to hear your quote for episode 75.
There you go. Well, my quote is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, as is often the case with this particular author. So this is Mark Twain.
Ooh, he's awesome for quotes, isn't he?
He's awesome for quotes. That was just dripping from his lips, or just, he must have been well, I think he was a very wise man in terms of his interpretation of people, and he could read people and places really well. But his quote that I'm going to share is that history never repeats itself, but it does often rhyme.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, a little snarky there in the best possible way.
Indeed. I think he was very good at taking the air out of the sails of pretentious people. So
I was going to say, I could just imagine, politicians or something walking away and getting it 30 seconds later, and realising that they've just been slapped with words.
They've been twained, yeah.
That's a good quote. I like that.
It is, yeah. What have you got for us?
Well, I was inspired a little bit by just, the effort that Conchita's going to translate her own book back into native tongue. And so now I did say before we recorded, I kind of broke the rules today. I got two, but the first one's a long one, the second one's super short. But so the first one is by author Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now, he was an American novelist and short story writer, and his works apparently often focus on history, morality, and religion. So his quote is, "Words, so innocent and powerless as they are, as standing in a dictionary, how potent for good and evil they become in the hands of one who knows how to combine them."
Oh, I really like that.
So, it's an onion one there.
Sitting in the dictionary, nothing at all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
nice.
Yes. And to finish it off, this one I really like. I didn't check out this person. His name's Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Oh, yeah.
I like this one. "Language is a city to the building of which every human being brought a stone." That's cool. I like that. That's a t-shirt.
Really cool. Yeah.
I think so.
Nice.
But so there I broke the rules. So I think maybe
you
should break
did.
the rules
Well,
next
I might
episode.
just break the rules next time, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Because it is all about us celebrating and talking about words and writing and all those kind of things. So don't forget that if you've loved this episode, please leave us some feedback either on your favourite podcasting platform. Leave us a star. That helps us get higher in the algorithm so more people can listen. And by all means, share the episode and forward it to somebody else so that they can have a listen to us faff on about books and writing, but also do the incredibly insightful interviews as we do with authors such as Conchita. And if you're a reader, jump on to australianbooklovers.com/booklovers. You can subscribe to our newsletter and be in the running for book giveaways, free book giveaways. And if you're an author and you'd like to list your book for free, then head to australianbooklovers.com/for-authors and upload all of your details. If you've got a short story or you've got some poetry, you can also drop that onto the website and we might spotlight you in the next episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, for all of our listeners out there that have always got their nose buried in a book, that is what being an Australian book lover is all about. So if you've read a book recently that you'd love to let listeners know about, and it doesn't have to be an Australian author because it's all about Australian book lovers, you can jump on the website, go to the podcast, and straight at the top of the page there's a big blue button that says feedback. Just drop us a line, 30 seconds, tell us what book you read, why it was fantastic, and we'll definitely put it on the show, because that's how we discover such great books. When you read something that you just ignites your imagination, you got to tell other people. I can't think of how many books I'm so glad someone's convinced me to read, and some that have literally shaped me as a person. So the big blue button, click say hello, what you'd like to hear, anything you'd like, we'd love to hear from you.
Indeed. Or you can talk to us on Twitter at Australian Books, on Instagram at Australian Book Lovers, and we're also on YouTube and LinkedIn. So drop us a note there or follow us for all of the recommendations and the books that we are spotlighting and celebrating.
And please stay tuned, because we have got a very heartfelt reading from author Conchita from selected passages from her book A Cry for Home. I all but guarantee within a minute or two you will be swept away and caught up in the tale. It really is a beautiful reading. So stay tuned, that's coming up. But in the meantime, Veronica, I believe we've reached the
we are at
tagline.
that point. Yes, we are.
So I was thinking, emigration, lots of, from one country to another, all that sort of stuff. I thought we're on board a plane ready for takeoff.
Right.
Heading off to a new adventure.
Okay.
How's that sound?
That sounds good. Normally I'd say
Yeah.
spaceship, but I think an aeroplane is more suitable for this one.
Well, yeah, we'll be going out of space at some points very soon in the episodes, but I thought this would keep this a bit more grounded. Maybe I can't say where we're heading, but I know what our mission will be. So I guess we'll get the engines ready and the old boom, boom. I don't know how to make a seatbelt noise, but something like boom, boom. But I'll see what little tricks I can do. But anyways, here we go.
One behind the captain's seat. First aid kit located behind the co-pilot seat. Preparation for takeoff. Please ensure that your seatbelt is securely fastened.
When we get to where we're going, Veronica,
Yeah.
we have to remember to do one thing.
What's that, Darren? What? Is it,
We need-
we put ourselves in the brace position?
No, as soon as we land, we have to remember to read
More
more
Aussie books.
Now, can we swap? I really wanted the window seat.
No, I like the window seat better.
Stewardess, we've got trouble. To everybody for joining us for episode 75, thank you so much, and take care for now, and I really look forward to being a part of your day, night experience, whatever it might be, when you download episode 76 coming very soon.
Take care.
A Cry for Home, Chapter 1. On that sunny summer Sunday, 19 July 1936, there was fear in the air. The previous day, the radio had announced that a state of war existed in all of Spain. Although there have been disturbances going on for some months, this was a new development. The small rural town of Nava del Rey lies some 60 kilometers southwest of the provincial capital, Valladolid, in the middle of northern Spain. Desi, a woman in her mid-50s, was walking along the street with her wicker basket to buy some groceries at the street market when she saw some people gathering by a house she knew. It was occupied by a farm laborer, Pedro. All of a sudden, the people scattered and 4 young men pushed poor Pedro out of his house. He was wearing his pajamas. One young man hit him repeatedly with the butt of his rifle. "Run, stupid bastard! Run! We are taking you to the council! Run!" Pedro seemed undecided. He looked back to the inside of the house. The rifle butt thudded onto his head and his body trembled from the blow. Another blow. Desi gasped in horror and unconsciously dropped the basket she's been carrying. Heedless of the fallen basket, she ran home. "Mama, what happened?" her daughter, Claudia, asked. "Close the door and don't let anybody in or out. Hell is here." Luis, Desi's son-in-law, was alarmed. "What are you talking about?" "A group of men have taken poor Pedro out of his house." "Pedro Garcia?" "Yes. He was still in his pajamas. He was probably in bed. They took him by force and they were hitting him with their rifle butts. They said they were taking him to the council." Right at that moment, they heard a gunshot. The 4 women, Desi, her daughter, and 2 granddaughters, were taken aback. After a few seconds of being paralyzed by fear, Luis ventured out of the house. "Where are you going, Luis?" His wife ran behind him. "Don't you go out!" Desi stopped her daughter. Luis briefly returned to his wife and said gently but firmly, "Get inside and close the door. Only open if it's me." The cook, the kitchen maid, and the 2 housemaids had made their way up to the hall to be with the family members. A cold chill ran through all the women as they huddled. Nobody spoke. Luis saw Pedro lying on the ground, blood pooling next to his head. Seeing the streets were deserted, he went to the council chambers and peeked through one of the windows. He saw a group of young men, 12 or 14 of them, he guessed. One of them looked older than the rest, around 50 maybe. He was sitting on a chair. Luis recognized the 3 6-point star of an army captain attached to his sleeve. The officer stood up, held his rifle aloft, and yelled, "Viva General Franco!" They all chorused and raised their rifles up high. Then they burst into shouts of, "Franco! Franco! Franco!" Luis was appalled. Stealthily, he moved away from the window and left to go home. "Let me in," he whispered at the front door. "What's going on?" Lacey and Claudia asked him. Part of him wanted to talk, but he couldn't. He looked around grimly. "Put the radio on." Before they could even switch on the wireless, a powerful male voice boomed from a loudspeaker in the street. "This is a war. General Franco is going to liberate Spain from the godless communists." There was a burst of machine gun fire. Terrified, they clung together. "Who is Franco?" Claudia asked her husband. "He's a general." Luis was nervously pacing. "Just a general in the army." Claudia and Desi looked at him. "This was started with a military coup." "A coup?" "Yes, the military has overthrown the government. This General Franco was in Morocco and he defied the government and..." He was sweating. "How can anybody defy a government?" Lacey asked her son-in-law. "The military is powerful." He paused, then thought out loud. "After all, they have the guns." "But this is a small town. Revolutions don't happen in places like this." Claudia desperately wanted to believe her own words. "What do you think is happening right now?" He tried to think but was overwhelmed. "And these people here in our town, what do they want? Why are they doing this? Who are they?" Claudia wanted explanations. "They are fascists, and they are out to get the Communist and Socialist Party members." "They want to kill all socialists and communists?" Claudia was horrified. "Are they going to kill us?" Little Isabel started to cry. Luis went down on his knees to reassure his 7-year-old daughter. "Nobody's going to do anything to us. Do you understand?" Isabel nodded. "I won't let anybody do anything to you." He embraced his younger daughter and then extended his arm to hold his 9-year-old daughter, Penny, as well. "Well, we don't have to be scared." Desi suddenly felt strong. "We haven't done anything wrong." "Neither did poor Pedro Garcia and his lying dead on the street." Everyone gasped. Straight away, Luis felt bad. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything." They all looked at Señora Aurelia, the cook. Luis closed his eyes, shook his head, and murmured, "Shit." In the heat of the moment, he'd forgotten that Pedro was Aurelia's nephew. The poor woman went into shock, gasping and barely able to breathe. "Let's get her downstairs into the kitchen. I'll make her a cup of tea," Claudia suggested. After they had gone downstairs, they heard the footsteps of several men outside. The men gave a big thump on the door. "Open up!" a voice shouted. Another voice, "In the name of Spain and Franco, open up!" They were kicking and hitting the door with their feet and rifle butt. Luis gestured to everybody to keep silent and whispered, "Don't worry, this house is big and strong. They won't be able to break in." Poor Señora Aurelia was still in frantic and sobbing, clutching her cup of tea, as if it was giving her comfort. Claudia pat her arm and shoulder. Desi looked at Aurelia, and tears spilled from her eyes. There was silence. Nobody had the right words to say. 5 minutes that felt like hours elapsed before the men at the door went away. Penny whispered to her dad, "If they can't come in, we could close all the doors and windows and stay here until the bad men leave the town." Louis embraced her. He spoke to their domestic help. "You must stay here until it's safe for you to go home." "I want to go now," Senora Aurelia said between sobs. "It's not safe. It'll be much better if you stay until things quieten down." Louis was adamant. Perhaps it was one of those things even evil took a rest in the heat of the day. After the family and the domestic helpers ate lunch together, Louis realized the streets had been silent for a while. So he decided to bundle Aurelia and the 3 young housemates into his black Hispano Suiza and drive each one of them to their house. During the drive, the wheels in his head kept spinning around. He put his foot on the brake. "Petrol," he thought out loud. "We need plenty of petrol." Then again, "I'll money from the bank." That will have to be in Valladolid. Back home, he announced to his family, "We have to leave." "Will Senora Aurelia and the others come with us?" the older daughter Benny wanted to know. "No," he replied. "In fact, we can't tell them what we are planning to do. That way, if anybody interrogates our servants, they can't say anything." He looked around as if to assure himself no one else was listening. "Anyway, we'll be gone before they have to come back." "When are we going?" Claudia wasn't very surprised by her husband's decision, but still, she resented that she hadn't discussed it with her first. "Tonight." She suppressed a gasp. "And where to?" "For the moment, we'll go to Valladolid." "Well, Valladolid isn't far from here," Desi was determined. "Let's eat well before we go, so we don't have to carry any food. Once we get there, we'll buy some groceries." "Your mother is right, but take all the jewelry with you." Claudia stood there for a moment. "Anything the matter?" Louis asked his wife. "You could have asked me before taking that decision." Louis took his wife by her shoulders. "I'm sorry. We have no choice." Silently, Claudia went around the house and collected all the valuables that were small enough to take. By dusk, the 5 family members were walking down the street, carrying a few suitcases with them. "Where did you leave the car?" Claudia asked. "Just outside town, 15 minutes on foot." "Why didn't you leave it at the door?" "Well, if they had seen the car by the door, they might imagine we are leaving town and they'd be here staking us out." 15 minutes isn't much. Desi was resigned to the situation and determined that it should not depress the others. And the suitcases aren't too heavy. Claudia, however, couldn't help but be depressed. "Yes, we are going to be using the same dress again and again." She looked back at the house and asked her husband wistfully, "When will we be back?" "I don't know," he sighed. "I do hope we can come back." Then he added honestly, "But I can't promise anything." Claudia felt a chill go through her. At that moment, a man crossed their path. "Good evening, Master Luis." "Good evening." He answered in a low voice, pulling his hat lower and tilting his head down. The man continued talking as Luis and family walked away. "I liked the speech you gave the other day." Then he yelled, "Viva el socialismo!" "Is he crazy?" Desi thought out loud. "He's just ignorant, Mama," Claudia said. Luis ran to the man and implored him in a low voice, "Don't say another word. Go home, close your door and don't let anybody in. And for God's sake, stop talking like that. You are putting everybody in danger." The man looked back at Luis, saw his grin, stared, and ran home. Luis returned to his family. "Come on, quick!"
Let's meet again. Where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.